Hello, everybody. Give people a couple minutes to jump in. What's up, Drax? We've been at it all morning already, huh?
Oh man, yeah. And on top of that, like I just got back from a little trip yesterday, so just catching up on a lot of things.
Dude,
Oh,
I know that game. At least, in the shows like the last one we were just on, it gives you a little bit of time as everyone else is active to sort of, message on the side, shoot some emails, whatever you got to get knocked out, right? Do a little double work.
yeah, a little double work.
Well, this is the first episode of the sort of new format we're doing here, and I'm very excited to have you on. So, as people tune in, or if you catch the recording of this, the sort of game plan is to have a more structured show with a more defined subject that's a little easier to repurpose. So I love doing the Twitter Spaces. They're one of my favorite things that I have the most fun hosting, but they're really hard to sort of like interpolate onto other platforms. At least in the version we were previously doing. Like when we were doing Yakuza, we would just have on a bunch of guests. It was a little more open format. It was like, okay, give us your quick pitch, then we'll dive in deep and talk about the markets a little. And that's like, I think, hard to follow. So with this show, we're going to be recording them, keeping them, throwing them onto a podcast on Spotify as well as on YouTube, and trying to provide some education to people who may not know a lot about Web3, about what are the things people are actually doing here. And the Foxes have got to be one of the best places to start. So Drax, I'm glad to have you, my man.
No, I appreciate you for having me on here. This is solid, hopefully a solid start for you guys. It's humbling to be on episode one of this. I guess we'll kind of see how the format goes. But by chance, I mean, you mentioned other formats. Have you done like live streams? Like, I don't know if you've seen any of our like shots fired or either using Riverside or Restream.
I have. I've only been able to tune into a couple of them, but I love those. I love anything that has like a more multimedia function to it, right? Like when you're doing the video ones, those are some of my favorites just because you get so much more context for people and like what are the emotions they're trying to get across, right? With the nonverbals you can pick up on. I'm a huge fan of those. And I think that that's some of the stuff where even if you're like not a crypto native, you can get a little more deeply involved in it, right?
Yeah, completely agree with you. It's fun being on them as well. There was one in particular where we weren't expecting other guests to come on, but apparently Frank had messaged whoever one of the hosts were to be on there, and so he just like randomly pops into it. So I love stuff like that. Like people might have thought that that was planned. It was absolutely not planned. Um, and so when you can shake it up some, even for the hosts that are on there, definitely makes for a pretty solid show.
And do you guys ordinarily save those? Because I think for that, that's like sort of the reasoning for this new format is like it's easier to save. You can sort of have things chronologically. There's like a much more defined like subject through all the shows, right? And really, I think what sparked the idea for me was a few weeks ago, I did the show that Phantom has, their podcast, and they call it the Zeitgeist. And I believe you've been on there before as well. And I was like, oh, this is like a much more easy to follow, like general format if someone was wanting to dive into a podcast and listen to multiple episodes. So then I started brainstorming over, how do we create our own sort of version of that? And here's where we ended up, man. I'm feeling good.
That's exciting. I'm excited to dive into it.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, welcome to the Build Your Reality Show. Definitely give Drax up here from the Famous Foxes a follow and tweet out the space. Let's get some people in here because we're going to be doing some deep dives, not only on the Foxes, but on the team. And I would love to, on that note, start off, Drax, if you just want to give the listeners a quick intro to who you are and what the Famous Foxes are about.
Yeah, sure. So name's Draxxts, co-founder for Famous Foxes. I've been in crypto since like early 2017, like January-ish, because I know 2017 was a whole cycle in itself. Um, my background is electrical engineering and MBA for a graduate. Have honestly just like fallen in love with crypto as a whole since 2017. It was something where I just felt that the tech really would change the world, and I honestly think that this weekend was very interesting to kind of see how it may actually get to that point. I'll call it fast tracked, but really from 2017 till now has been a journey. And outside of that, I've always been interested in like personal finances and personal growth and all that kind of fun stuff. So, I've just been part of trading discords for crypto, and just the general communities that have always existed just outside of the realm of NFTs. And in 2021, had a small group of people that were pooling funds together to kind of trade CryptoPunks. I'd seen them come out, CryptoPunks come out in 2017 for like $50. I thought people were crazy for buying them. Because at the time, I mean, super, super new. I mean, I still would actually say I think people were crazy for buying CryptoPunks for $50 in 2017. I mean, CryptoKitties were also a thing. There's a bunch of others back then. Um, but fast forward to 2021, and there was just so much more to it where I was like, why are these things 12 ETH when ETH was like $3,500? And also, why are they making one ETH profit on a 12 ETH, NFT? Like, what is going on with this? And so I just dived deeper into it to find out, like, hey, this is basically a token that you can stack whatever you want on top of it. It proves ownership, and it kind of unlocks like keys to a box that people I think would really be excited for on many different levels. And I'm like, well, shit, like, have to figure out how to get more involved with this. And had, a tight knit group of friends that I've just met in the crypto space. And the three of us had gotten together and decided to launch Foxes. We said, fuck it, like we could change up the game. There's a lot of opportunity that exists out there at the time. I mean, we really were looking at trying to be unique, as I think a lot of people do when they go to create a project. I don't think anybody intentionally tries to just recreate something that's already done. It might be the case for some projects, but for the most part, I think people really want to be unique. And that's kind of how just got into it, just like dug right in. Was working a full-time job, now do Foxes full-time since May of last year, and wouldn't have it any other way. I absolutely love the space, love where we're going. The market's the market, it's going to go up and down. Emotions are going to be all over the place, which is perfectly fine. That's exactly how markets work. But I'm long-term bullish on the space as a whole. We're very adaptable as Foxes within the space to be able to handle punches and roll with it. And at the end of the day, like, there again, the amount of opportunity ceases to exist in the space, for as much as people want to give excuses for X, Y, and Z things happening and trying to correlate them. It more so comes down to where are we heading as a whole, what's kind of the longer term vision, not the short term, and kind of building for it. So that's kind of a little bit of background on myself. And like I said, we started Foxes early 2021. We wanted to be different. We didn't want to make another monkey project. Realistically, at the time, a lot of products were just coming out with monkey art, based off of cyberkongs and Bored Apes kind of being the more popular on the ETH space. And we had a few other art styles, that we've at least shared with our more hardcore community that they mess around with in our Discord, before we landed on Foxes. But yeah, like I said, when we launched Foxes, we wanted to change the game up. We wanted to have some level of actual utility, that's kind of behind the project as a whole. We've built that out, and continue to build on top of it, based off of problems that exist in the current ecosystem. Solutions that we can come up with, and trying to provide a buttery smooth platform to do all these things on. And that's really what we are as Foxes. Stacked on top of that, super cute IP. We've added, a little bit more ruggedness to them, if you will, from some of the art upgrades that we have done by Xeno, one of the more pronounced one-on-one artists in the space. And we have just a ton of offerings within the project. Anything from no-code solutions for your amateur creator, or even veteran creators in the space that want to do certain things, such as taking snapshots and airdropping tokens to people. Super, super helpful tools for that. And then we have our other offerings for peer-to-peer swapping of regular NFTs. We've got our raffle platform, which has been very, very fun from a degenerate standpoint. Same thing with coin flip, or flip as we call it. Whitelist and regular SPL token marketplace. We have like a Marmalade, which is a commission marketplace for artists. So any artist that's interested in trying to get commission work can certainly use that platform. We have partnered up with the guys over at Boombox to create a music NFT marketplace. So we have just like a ton of different offerings that really stand on top of the project. And then at its absolute core, with the 4 collections that we have, there's this gamified staking element to it where foxes go off on missions. They come back with chests and they can get rewards from those. And we kind of just have this whole like ecosystem built around the foxes as a whole. So there's a lot to it. I would definitely say for anyone that's interested in the foxes as a whole, try to figure out what really you're looking for from a project. I'd start there and then just dive deeper and deeper into the weeds. We do have a YouTube channel right now from an educational content side. It only has a couple of videos on citrus. I'm working on kind of creating some more for that. We just launched recently to like an Instagram channel that's more wholesome with some pretty solid tweets or not tweets messages and such on Instagram. And yeah, we just have like an amazing community stacked on top of everything. And I would say we're kind of a force to be reckoned with within the Solana ecosystem.
Yeah, you touched on so many awesome things, not just about foxes, but the space in general. And I think one thing that really stood out to me, is the idea of perseverance in face of the markets, right? Obviously, the current economic situation is not very good. NFTs and crypto in general, but even more specifically, NFTs in their own niche within that niche are such a highly speculative asset. And it's interesting how frequently we talk about NFT collections as projects. But really, I think we've gotten so complex that these quote unquote projects fall into like many different categories, right? Now we have ones that are purely just for the art. You're buying things from an artist. We have ones where you're buying purely into a community, and the utility is almost like joining a digital country club, right? And we have others where it's really a business. And that business can tap into all of these different areas at the same time. You can have a business that has great art, that has a great community. But I think that for you all, very particularly, and why I'm so excited to dive deeper on this first episode of the show, is you are a great example of a project, quote unquote, that is a business that also has a great community, that also has very easily recognizable art, that is an intellectual property that'll be able to grow exponentially over time. I really think that, especially with how we've seen projects like Claynosaurs grow, with their sort of family friendly look and appeal, and given those Pixar vibes, that you fit very, very nicely into that same sort of approachable sphere on the 2D side of things. So what do you view as the perspective from like an average individual who maybe is considering looking at NFTs? They're somewhat familiar with blockchain, as to why they should be looking at Famous Foxes, and what are sort of the best benefits to them if they're a new member, a new participant of the ecosystem?
Yeah, so it's a good loaded question. I love that, and we do get that very often. What I would start with too, if you are a new perspective person within the NFT space, I'd recommend just joining our Discord as a start. I mean, I think it's always a good thing for people is to kind of jump in and suss out like communities as a whole. So, jump in the Discord, chat up people. It doesn't even have to be focused on Famous Foxes. You can come in, just curious about NFTs, just to get a sense from our current community, who to look out for on Twitter, like what are certain things that people should be kind of looking at. Our community is super, super helpful, depending on who's on at really any given time, and ourselves included. And from there, I mean, I would really say that myself getting into NFTs, like I really got into it more so for communities. So to vibe with people, to kind of have similar interests, to do different things. Maybe it's like game nights or poker or just like degen chatting or whatever you want to do, like that I think for me is what resonated the most. It's the reason that I even knew about Discord from the beginning. It's the reason why I will still always be on Discord. It's just that sense of community. There's a lot of people that, depending on whatever your life status is, like, you might not have a network of people like local to you, or you maybe you change up, your life or what have you, and you always have this to kind of fall back on. I do think there's a lot of value to that personally. um Outside of that, I mean, if you're familiar with NFTs or a little bit familiar with NFTs, and you're looking at more so the value side from what our actual NFTs have, like I mentioned, the missions that we have, where foxes go off on missions every week, and they have a chance at bringing back chests, and they get rewards from them and all that kind of fun stuff. I would say like that's a pretty solid value add, because from our project side, I mean, a portion of the revenue that we bring in, we allocate into these rewards that we give out to people. It's active, it's not passive, so we do get some stuff for that every once in a while, which is perfectly fine. Um, and you get to level up your foxes. You get to do different things with them, upgrade their traits if you want to, potentially get more chests from doing that, up to a certain point. And you also have like those kinds of like, I call them like sub DAO type of communities and things to also vibe with. So if it's trait specific things, I know that's very popular for a lot of other projects. It's very similar to us as well, where again you just have like these other communities to latch onto. But if you're a creator, there's different perks and certain tools. As an example, like Snapshot, you have to have a Fox in order to take a snapshot if you're looking to do that and airdrop people. Um, if you're a raffler, if you're interested in getting into the raffle space, owning a TFF or an FFF cuts your fee in half and also gets you on the featured page. If you're interested in the lending side, as an FFF holder, you get half off of the fees for what we charge for the platform. So you pay half versus the full fee amount as a borrower. And there's just a lot of like different like little perks. Sending out dings, you can modify the background image if you want to, so you don't have to use our own branded images to message people with. There's really just like a lot of different things that people can kind of mess around with. And it's just a lot of fun, in all honesty, to be a part of a community for as long as we've existed too. I mean, our foxes go hard, and we've been going hard for a year and a half at this point. And there's no sign of stopping for us. So I absolutely love it.
It's really hard actually to try to accurately describe to people, I think, who have not participated in this space, the value of the community, because you talk about that was sort of the main driver for you getting involved in NFTs. And for me, I'll be completely candid, when I first got involved in trading at all, it was purely by accident. My first, funny enough, NFT I ever purchased was actually on crypto.com, on their NFT site, and it was their first celebrity collab that they did. And I think this was like January or February of 2021. And I was bored out of my mind. I was like, whatever, this seems interesting. And it was not high volume whatsoever. So I got like the first edition of this release, and then I relisted it for like a $300 or $400 profit, thinking that there's no way, and woke up the next morning and it had been sold. So that experience is what hooked me. When I got here, the community side of things is what made me say, okay, this is really interesting. There's a lot more that's happening here. There are real products that are being built behind these. There is real value to the communities themselves through events and access, and of course education. It's really hard to understate how much I've learned from other people through these faceless Discord accounts, where there's just a JPEG representing this individual. But I think why it makes more sense maybe when you start to elaborate is just looking at how much society in general has changed across the board. Membership in things like clubs, membership in any religious institutions, membership in any sort of nonprofit organizations, all of these sorts of things have just declined year over year over year. So this sort of idea of like finding your tribe locally is really diminished. And I think especially coming off the heels of COVID, where it was hard for a lot of people to even do anything and leave their homes, it really just sort of exacerbated that feeling of like isolationism. And this idea of these digital communities, I think, sort of filled that gap for a lot of people. I know it did for me, for sure. And being able the last few years to then meet some of those people in person at events, to be able to do things like on my end, I actually booked a month stay with some buddies, and we sort of had our own hacker house for a few of us working in Web3 and just collaborated together. Has been honestly the experience I never would have guessed would have happened, and that I've appreciated the most.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that. So like this past week and some change, like I did a road trip with my family, and we went down to like the Orlando area, and had stopped, a couple of times to meet some community members along the way. And I love it. I love meeting people in person. Like there's I think that there becomes a point where like you kind of almost disassociate the fact that like every PFP is an actual person behind it. Same for founders, is the same thing for community members, and everyone has a story. It does. People might think they're boring, and that's fine. But at the end of it, like everybody has their own like personal story and journey, and what they're doing and where they're at, that I find absolutely fascinating. It's one of the things from my previous job of being able to meet so many people. Um, Loved to just try to figure out like who are you? You know what I mean? Like there's so much more to it than hey, we both found an interest in online JPEGs, that do things, and I love that. Like I think that there's so much to it. I do agree with you too from the isolation the yeah isolation side with like COVID and all that fun stuff. But realistically, if you look at the way in which like society has been running, everything is becoming online based, mobile friendly. It's just becoming like more natural. To be more online. And I even said it to like my wife recently, where it's like it's interesting when you meet somebody who's met their significant other or someone that they're dating like not online. And it's just like, whereas like back when we were in the dating realm, people were like, oh, you met someone online, like that's crazy. It's almost the complete opposite now, and I don't see that changing. I think it's just going to go that same path. I don't know if for better or worse, but these online communities and this online identity and everything that like we're really doing right now, I think is just going to get amplified over the next forever. And it's really fun to kind of be a part of that right now, even if people think that like there's varying levels of it actually being, legitimate or what have you. It's going to be in the future, in my personal opinion.
Oh, dude, could not agree more. It's also, I think it also just unlocks more opportunities. As weird as this sounds, like to find people that you're more closely aligned with. Like, I know for my mom, as an example, she grew up in a town of 400 people in Missouri, right? And so your options of who you hang out with, the things that you even get exposed to with regards to like hobbies you might have, you're just so much more limited in what you're what's accessible to you. And this digital world makes it a lot easier for you to find hobbies and content that you like to consume that is maybe outside of what you'd be immediately exposed to in your real life. It gets you access to people who have similar interests and likes. And to me, I think that that's like a very unique and interesting thing. I mean, I don't know that we have lived in a time that is more interconnected and more educated on the various different cultures and belief systems and interests that people have than right now.
Yeah, I'd completely agree with you. And for what it's worth too, like the ability that like Web3 really unlocks for the space as a whole is that it really brings everything to like an equalization point. That I think that we haven't really ever seen in like life. And what I mean by that is the talent and skill set that exists, crosses boundaries from country to country, or ocean to ocean, if you will. And it doesn't matter where you're from, like your efforts are still valued the same in the Web3 space as compared to it is in the Web2 space, where you know and this is absolutely no offense to anyone, but if there's third world countries and things where it's cheaper to have labor, businesses set up, call centers and things like that to operate there because they know that it's cheaper for them to do so. In this space, it doesn't matter, wherever you live, the value is kind of the value set by like the market as a whole. It's supply and demand. It doesn't matter where you come from. And I love that. I think that there's so much power to that people really don't. I think a lot of people probably underestimate it. Um, and like with what we had seen with COVID, is people were kind of moving from cities to suburbs or other states or wherever you want to go, because the whole like online thing of being more friendly, of doing that, has just been a huge benefit too for a lot of people, and honestly empowered me to be able to get extra time to build foxes out, which has been pretty awesome. So it's just all about the opportunities that exist. And again, like within the crypto space, it being an enabler and helping people out to be able to kind of bridge those gaps for what they want to do with life outside of just being stuck to like a 9 to 5 job of doing whatever is like local to you.
It's so funny you bring that up because it reminds me of way back in the day, the first time I read, I don't know if you've ever read this, The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. And I love the concept, although I'd say that we're definitely doing the opposite in Web3. I think it's more like the 70-hour work week ordinarily. But it's about how do you get the most value out of the least time, right? Like trying to increase your yield so that you can go quote unquote live your fullest life. But there's a part in that in hindsight, when I first read it, I was like, God, that really made me cringe a little and recoil from the book, talking about exactly what you're mentioning, hiring third world help in the form of like digital assistants and things, because it's so much cheaper for them to do all your planning, to respond to all your emails, and then you just don't even have to worry about it. And it's a very unique value proposition in this world to have your identity be your profile picture, whatever, anonymous pseudonym that you're operating under, and just truly have the market value of what it is that you're doing, and not bring in what are often, especially now that we are so interconnected and there's so much international work and things taking place, that you're not operating off of what are, for the most part, like negative stereotypes, right? It unlocks the true value and equalizes people who are bringing value. It's what are you bringing to me, and how can I adequately provide you compensation for that? And it's not just operating off of what people have ideated for years is, oh, this particular individual is only worth XYZ as a result of something completely outside their control.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I it sucks that exists in general. There isn't much to really do about it. I think that's just how the kind of world works. But I do think that there's a lot more good that exists with crypto as a whole and NFTs for providing opportunities for people, that might not be able to get them, from wherever they live at currently, or whatever their kind of um, what the term is that we use around here is like the zip code that you're born in. You know what I mean? So it's different across the whole world, but yeah, it's makes me more bullish on the space, all the time.
What I want to know is, I do not think that you and Foxy Dev are in quote unquote the same zip codes, or were born in the same zip codes. So how did you guys meet? And for anyone who's listening who may not know, Famous Foxes have two team members who just absolutely crush it. The founding team. I'm always shocked when I remember how small your team is, despite your output. How did you two meet each other, and what was that first conversation like when you decided that you wanted to kick this thing off?
Yeah, no, that's a great question slash point there. But yeah, I mentioned a little bit earlier. So like being in the trading space of crypto, primarily, is how I had left, found Foxy Dev. Being part of these communities, being kind of in this general ethos that we're already in right now for NFTs, but pre NFTs. And so we were part of a crypto trading. Well, I was part of a stock trading Discord that, long story short, had mentioned to the owners of it that, hey, you probably should look at Bitcoin. This was actually the end of 2016, and I still like have that conversation with that person, because they didn't actually end up launching, I think, a crypto Discord until 2018, if I'm not mistaken. Which is still great. Don't get me wrong. They still eventually did a thing, but I thought it was just really funny to kind of be earlier than I think others that were in the space to find out about it. And they spun up a crypto trading side for like Discord community, if you will, and it's all about like learning how to trade and risk management and all these kind of fun things. Like the again, from a financial side, being interested in finances outside of like your current 9 to 5 job was what got me into it. Boxy Dev was part of that community, and we kind of had just grew a relationship from there. Got into a smaller BSC shitcoin trading group of people that was much smaller than the original Discord that we were still in, and from there just had kind of spun off the idea of like, hey, you work in info security, kind of more so in like the business background side, if you will. And then also we had an artist too that was in that same group, and we said, hey, we've got this right skill set, to kind of join forces on this and to try to spin up Foxes. Like, we could give it hell, and that's what we did. And I'll say that the rest is really history with it.
Literally making history through Discord. Yeah, it's funny on our end at Yaku, very similar experience. I only got into Solana NFTs specifically through a weird old crypto influencer who had a trading Discord that they started back pretty similar time, like 2018, 2019. And one of their friends created a spin-off Discord server specifically for Solana NFTs in like probably June, July of 2021. And when I got in there, talk about hilarious. The founders of it, it went from like this awesome, really quickly growing community of like, it ended up getting up to like 12 or 1300 people pretty quickly, which at the time was like wild and just completely free and open to the public. To the founders went on to be like serial ruggers. And if you get bored, Undervalued NFTs, if you've seen him, has a whole YouTube video about it. And it came out like a hot minute ago now. But they did the what was it, like the something ninjas and Soul Street and like a Thugbirds derivative. It was very odd. And so I always joke that like my first experience there showed me the community that I wanted to emulate, because all the people that were there and active every day were great, and also the leadership style that I wanted to avoid.
Yeah, no, it's very funny like how it works out. And I mean, I'll touch on it for like a hot second too, but like that's one of the main reasons that like our founding team went from 3 members to 2 members, was just that we see the longer term vision for what we're building and have built so far. That wasn't the case for all 3 of us, and so eventually we just came to a point where it's like, if you want to go off and do other things, that's fine. It just can't have an impact on what we're building. And like I said, we just have like a larger vision with Foxes as a whole, so we've had to go down to 2 core members, and then we've built up a team around it. We have, I think, about another 12 people, or 12 if not more than 12 people, that are working with us now, as a part-time basis sometimes, for all the things that we have in Foxes: community managers, moderators, creatives that we have, or marketing within Discord and Twitter. So there's just like so much other opportunity that we've built out, with our team for Foxes, which has been pretty awesome at the same time. And, we've been able to do it. I think that's the one thing that throughout our whole history, and even still, like, the builders side kind of does become like a meme for projects, for some projects, at least in my opinion. And then it's just very interesting when, we're still just chugging along, doing what we're doing. And others are, kind of closing up shop, which is unfortunate, but it's just been the way that we've been able to, I would say, do things on the cheap, and I would say do things right. And honestly too, like, more so the passion from our side. Like, we're not here to just make a quick buck. If we wanted to, like, we probably could have, but that's just not like the goal for what we've built with Foxes.
And you have built a lot, genuinely. So, for anyone listening who may not be familiar, the famous Foxes are probably most well known in Solana NFTs, and really, I mean, more broadly across chains, as being a shipper builder collection, because they have a whole variety and suite of tools that they have built, the majority of which are just free to use for anyone. So if you are active in NFTs or you're thinking about getting active, there's a lot of stuff that they have at their website that you can check out to sort of see what is possible. And what do you think has been your general philosophy behind the continuation of the building of those tools? Because I know obviously early days, a lot of people were giving you guys shit constantly of where's the value to holders? You're just making these things free for people to use, which to me is hilarious that that's like a negative feedback that ever existed. Like getting down bad on people for just providing a free service that improves the space. That's really funny. Uh, but in general, it's also just not true. There's a ton of value. We've talked about the chests for missions that are available all the time. But what has sort of been like the philosophy as you look to like develop these out to make your existing ones more robust? And how do you sort of prioritize what do you work on next?
Yeah, I think I would say first off, I'd say like that's kind of like the $1 million question. I mean, in general for any project, I do agree with you too. And just to touch on the point you made there, so early days in some of the tools that we've created, there were people like you had said that were like, why, your tools are so cheap. I'm just gonna go, not buy a Fox and use your tools. I'm like, that's fine. Like use the tools, tell your friends to use them, tell your grandparents to use them. Like that's kind of the main goal, right? Like the more you use our tools, the better. The more everyone uses the tools, the better. I think like that's one of the biggest things that not a lot of people realize is like that reduced friction and like marketing is a lot more valuable to us than to have someone to just buy a Fox and not do anything with it. And that's where like the other side of the benefits of, if you're a creator, if you're a degen, if you're, a trader, you have like access to all these other things of owning a Fox. And that again is just based off like you personally of what you want to get with it. Um, but yeah, from like uh the general concept for how we go about, like building, really everything that we've built so far, starting at the very beginning, more so was around figuring out like what do people need, right? What does utility mean for NFTs? In a way that it's not just like a meme, because like people were like, oh, token for, merch and whatever, like you just stake, get a token and you can probably claim some merch or something. And we looked at what are problems, like what are the problems that exist in this space. It's the same thing as any other business that wants to exist in the world. It's like there's a problem that exists and you go and you find a solution for it, you create it, and then you build off of it. Early days was Foxy Swap. People were doing OTC trades. We would probably get, 50 to 100 DMs a day asking us like, "Hey, can you middleman this trade?" Because they needed someone trusted in the space. And it becomes exhausting. I mean, it's hard to say no to people depending on what kind of the trade is. I mean, not for like a one soul NFT, but if someone was doing, a 20, 30, 50 soul NFT at the time, and Soul's $200 a piece, like, yeah, you need someone trusted in the middle. And you always saw these people getting scammed, and we're like, this is ridiculous. So we built Foxy Swap. We made it so you had to use, our native coin Foxy. We approved collections on it, so you knew you weren't getting screwed over by getting a fake NFT. And we built out, Foxy Swap from there. People were trying to figure out how do they get in touch with somebody else if they have a PFP that's listed on an exchange at a stupid price, like if there's a Fox listed for like 1 million soul. And at the time there was no easy way to do it, so we created Ding, also charged Foxy for it. Then eventually we got into the whitelist token space. There was a tweet that went out by Big Brain asking for, I don't know, some llama whitelist tokens or whatever it is. And we're like, let's make a whitelist token marketplace because there seems to be a need for it. Built it 48 hours later. We had $1 million worth of volume in the first week. So we obviously knew we had something good there. And we saw like the reduced friction with using Sol as the native currency versus Foxy for tools. And so we switched over our tooling to Sol instead of Foxy, and then built in other ways in our ecosystem to use Foxy, almost akin it to an arcade token rather than, like an actual token um, for like doing things with, and or not pump it like a token just to pump the value for whatever that token is. And then outside of that, it's just been like, what are problems in the space? What are people interested in? We get feedback from our community. You know, I'd comfortably say 2/3 of our tools have been ideated from the community side. We've built them, improved them, get feedback, improve and build on top of that. So like that's really it for us. Like it really comes down to like the way that we've built so far, for the most part, is directed towards, you know, problems that exist in the space. And when you look at crypto as a whole, like I think it's going to be true for a strong majority of people that are creators, where I don't know if there's going to be like super unique novel ideas that are just going to absolutely blow up within the space. I think it's more so going to be finding pain points that exist in current supply chains, in current, you know, infrastructure from a financial standpoint, and improving them by using blockchain tech. And like that's what's going to make it more valuable, from any native currency to NFT to program or protocol that people are building. Like it's all about solving problems that exist in a more effective, efficient manner.
And when you find a good solution to a problem, I mean, you know, almost immediately. I remember when your whitelist token market first came out, how it just dramatically shifted the whole paradigm of the market. And for anyone who's not super familiar, really quickly, whitelist getting access to a guaranteed initial sale of an NFT. And back in the day, if you had it and you wanted to sell it, trade it, whatever it was, really, really difficult, hairy situation. There was no platform to do it that was safe. And when the token marketplace selling those came live on the Fox's website, not only did it make it easier for people to do that, it just added a new layer of speculation. I can remember very well mints that took place where the whitelist token was selling for, and you know, Solana was triple digit figures at the time, right? So we're talking $100-$200 in some cases, uh, and they're selling for 7, 8, 9 Solana. So people are paying, you know, $1,000 or more just to have access to the right to buy a product. And so people watching the movement of the value of the product before the product even exists just added like a whole new paradigm to what people were assessing. And I know it was so interesting because not only did it open the door for like native natural price speculation, but of course also teams could go in and manipulate that price on the front end to make it appear more or less bullish, right? I know there was a couple of times when people got caught buying their own whitelist tokens just to drive the price up to make the perception of value higher than what it was.
Yeah, and it was mixed. It goes both ways. I mean, I would say for the most part, from a team side, we've actually heard a lot of teams say that like they're not going to mint at a certain period of time until like there is a decent demand for their whitelist tokens. Like it became a really big thing from a speculation piece. But the interesting angle to it too is that like having a token market, again, like reduces that friction. It adds transparency around pricing for like any token that it is going to exist, and at the same time like it does give like that security side where people know they can just go and trust this platform to get whatever the token is off of there, because that's like the approved verified token from that project. You know, so they know they're not getting rugged if someone tries to do like an OTC, you know, shady deal. And we charged a very reasonable platform fee, 0% for Foxes, any Fox, FFF or TFF, and 2% for anyone that wasn't. So, you know, I mean, it still is, still exists. It's still a great platform, more so enabling SPL tokens now. But yeah, it's been like super interesting to see the evolution really of whitelist concepts. You know, a lot of projects and stuff kind of built around that, launch pads, all that fun stuff. And seeing how whitelist tokens were, you know, I'll say a year ago they were super hot. The same time.
And now you have a new product. You are jumping into the world of NFT-Fi. and launching your new platform, Citrus, which is a lending platform where people who own NFTs can get instant liquidity through loans for those NFTs, which I'm sure if I were to explain as a concept to my dad, he would shit a brick. But it's only growing like crazy every day, right? And I think you guys are already starting to take a pretty decent chunk of that market share. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. And for what it's worth, I mean, a lending product as a whole like is very interesting to build out from a conceptual standpoint. I mean, like you would put it, for your father that he'd shit a brick. It really is. It's like there's a lot of complex components to it. At its absolute core, right? The interesting thing with NFTs is that NFTs are like a leveraged asset that's on top of a uh, cryptocurrency that is also volatile. So the price action can be all over the place for both sides, and that can create very interesting price actions as a whole within the lending space. So at its core, like these are shorter term loans, and by shorter term on Citrus, you can do anything from 3 day to 21 day. 21 day is actually like quite long compared to other platforms. And you have the ability as a lender to create the terms that you want. So you can do anything from 120% to 240% APY. You can, like I said, make them from 3 days to 21 days. There's a couple of different intervals: 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 14, and 21 days. And then you can adjust whatever the offer is that you want to offer for like the floor price. We've added enhancements to make private offers to people, the ability for folks to list their NFTs if they have like a more rare one they want to list and try to get more liquidity for it or less liquidity for it. You can accept any term that's out there in the market. You don't have to accept the highest a loan to floor value, which you might do for many reasons. It could be based off of the amount of time. If that highest loan to floor value is a 3 day loan, as an example, and you might want something that's a 14 day, you have the option to pick whatever you want. Or if you only want to borrow a little bit of soul and there's offers that are on the lower side, you can just take that lower loan as well, and then that way you can pay it off whenever you want to. It's very interesting at its core. Like NFT lending, people do it for a plethora of reasons. I think from the actual borrower side, depending on how aggressive lenders are, it really is to hedge the price action for that underlying NFT. So we see it a lot where people are offering 90% loan to floor ratio loans on NFTs. It reduces your exposure to that NFT to about 10%. So what that really means is like over that week, 2 week, 3 week period, if that NFT were to go down more than 10%, you unfortunately just let it default. The person that had lent you that soul now gets that NFT, and you have the soul from that original loan that you had taken out. And then on the opposite side, I mean, if it goes up whatever percent, 10, 15, 20, 100%, you can just pay off the loan that you took out initially, and then you can sell it in the secondary market. So your risk is 10% versus holding on to the whole asset. So it's a very interesting market to be a part of, at least from the speculation side on both the price action of Solana and the price action for NFTs. But it is a pretty wild opportunity for both borrowers and lenders. I'm primarily a lender. I'm longer term bullish on most of the NFTs that I lend out on, and it's a pretty decent like yield farming like mechanism, if you will, for people that are paying off loans based off of what their strategy is. So it's very complex. I would almost call it very similar to say options, if you will, but it's a loan. You're putting soul against an NFT and using that as collateral, so it's not exactly an option. And it's a very interesting product at its absolute core.
Well, and over time, I think you talk about we're in obviously a very speculative asset category, and there's a lot of fluctuation, not only in the value of NFTs, but in the crypto they're backed in. But over time, it should, on paper, I guess I should knock on wood on this one, get a little more stable, right? And to me, there's some really interesting long-term potential use cases and implications of this sort of decentralized loan mechanism as a whole. I don't know if you've ever seen or even seen clips of, as an example, the movie The Banker, about a guy who moves to Texas, and he is a black guy who buys an apartment complex. He ends up buying a bank and giving members of his community loans at a time when that wasn't really possible, in an area where it wasn't possible. And not to say that JPEGs are going to facilitate that exact same experience, but I mean, there are still a lot of people out there who have difficulty getting access to things like traditional loans, to traditional financing of any sort. And it's always just really interesting to me. We talk about how this sort of decentralized finance is accessible and open to anybody, but the use cases within that world are getting more complex over time. I do think they will get more stable. And as a result, I think that, especially for higher value assets, like things like Bored Apes, eventually, I think you'll have some even longer term loans, right, that are available that are able to provide people with a lot greater liquidity than they might be able to get out in the real world at some interesting terms, I'm sure. But all that to say, no, I love it. I think it's like a very interesting forefront that we're at, that's going to open up a lot of possibilities for people, both on the lending and borrowing side, that they would not get probably in their ordinary lives.
Yeah, and I know they wouldn't. 100% no, they wouldn't. What I would say too, and this isn't coming from like a doom and gloom angle. I do get worried about like longer term things for different projects, because anything can happen. Honestly, anything can happen tomorrow. The more exposure you have for the longer a period of time, honestly, should come with a higher a premium, just because of the way the space is from a volatility standpoint. So from an individual lender, if it's an institution as an example, I don't think they'd ever offer longer terms than probably a month. If they do, they have to have either the craziest risk tolerance or like the lowest loan to floor ratio you possibly can get. Um, but I think there's just like a lot of people that need to be a little bit more sophisticated in the way they're doing these terms for loans, because um, the space is so speculative that people are just interested in trying to get an NFT for 4% less than like its current floor price, even if they have to wait a week or 2 weeks to get it. And I think that that's absolutely bananas, because there's so much risk there that it's tough to convince people otherwise. They're going to do whatever they're going to do. They might have been in the lending space for a while. They might be doing well with it, so they just up their risk tolerance. But I just find it fascinating that the participants that are in the space are like as risky as they are for NFT
Oh,
lending.
without a doubt. That's why earlier, I knocked on wood, and I really did in real life, by the way, uh, that we hopefully get more stable one day to sort of empower a wider use case of them, because you're completely right. Right now, doing longer loan terms and having a wide variety of options is just like, candidly, it's just not a smart thing to do, right? Even
Yep.
joking about NFTs that have been quote unquote stable coins, like, Solana Monkey Business has been somewhere in the range of 200 Solana for seemingly a year or more, right? But that 100, or excuse me, that 200 Solana today versus 6 months ago is a drastically different valuation, right? And that's one of the collections that has been the most stable. So you look at other things that have had larger fluctuations in their floor price with the addition of the valuation of Solana itself. Yeah, it's just right now really, really risky business doing longer term stuff. But I'm hopeful that one day we'll get to a spot where I can take out a loan against one of my famous foxes to buy a second house.
One day, I hope that's true. One day, I do hope that's true. Yeah, and for what it's worth, you know what I mean. Like you bring up a good example there with SMBs, and again, not to be on the doom and gloom side, but like a lot of the stuff recently with HadeSwap purchasing, or HadesDAO, I should say, purchasing SMBs, and whatever the direction is like for that collection going forward, right? That there's like no guarantee that it's going to stay that stable coin price. I'm using air quotes there that you can't see. And I think like that's like the bigger part of like the uncertainty, especially for like longer term, any kind of like longer term financial product. Um, where like realistically, a vote could be put to get forth tomorrow to delete the whole SMB collection, and approved. And I don't think that's going to happen, but that could happen. And I think that's where, like, from a risk standpoint, longer term, things like really have to have like a high level of like um I don't know, like a high level of risk to them that I think like just doesn't really make much sense. We don't know what's going to happen from the regulation standpoint within the whole market, over longer periods of time. Like there's just so much uncertainty that can exist that has an impact on the price action of these assets. And that's where like I'm not sure what that longer term, space looks like.
Yeah, I mean, literally tomorrow, the governments of several countries could come out and decide that they're going to ban all crypto trading, and then a week later come back out and turn it back on. And I'm not going to name names, but we know who does that 4 or 5 times a year. And every time they do it, we get a little weird hiccup, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. I mean, it's not it's not in the control of the individuals that hold it, and it can't be. I think like at its core, when you think about it, right? Like you mentioned, to take out a loan against your Fox for a house. There's a lot of speculation that goes into the price action of like a Fox or what have you, a Solana NFT. Compared to the way like traditional assets are. I mean, even in the housing market, right? If you wanted to take a mortgage out for your house, let's say last year compared to this year, right? Like the price action swings, the rates swing, like there's no guarantee. That the only guarantee is that your house hopefully is still going to be there, unless you live in like Kansas or something where you have the potential of like a tornado tearing it down. And there's like an inherent value with that doesn't really fluctuate that much over a 30-year period of time. Like that's where you end up getting those longer term loan options. But even for like vehicles, they give you like 5 to 7 year terms and stuff like that. Like they really aren't giving you that long of a term compared to what the actual thing is, because cars should exist for a while. It's no different for any other like traditional financial element or instrument compared to NFTs and crypto trading
Well,
assets.
first off, as a Northwest Missouri raised individual, I got to say, I wish more tornadoes were ripping up houses in Kansas. Uh, and secondly, no, you're completely right, man. Like at least in even in the crazy swing of housing, which is nuts, a whole other topic we could dive into forever. My roommate, he bought his house at like the the very beginning of the low interest rate period here in Seattle, and it went up in value 18 months later by like $250,000. And today it is now being it's back to being worth the same price basically as when he bought it. So pretty crazy fluctuation there. But guess what? He still has his house. And JPEGs, to your point, you don't always necessarily even get to keep them. That could be voted that they get deleted. They can close up shop, and all of the value attached to them is no longer there. And hey, I guess you've got the art, but I don't know that the art provides as much utility as your house does, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I have two more questions for you, my man, and then we can wrap this up. And I'll also, after that, open it up if anyone in the audience wants to pop up and ask Drax a question about foxes. But my last two questions: one, why Solana? And two, who do you recommend for a future episode of the Build Your Reality Show?
Yeah, one is an easy answer. Honestly, scalability, and user experience. I think are the two key things. I know some people will probably give a little bit of pushback because Solana has gone down, a few times. Um, but realistically, when you look at the volumes that people are doing and just the transactions as a whole, the ability to build on top of and to not be as restricted, I think is massive, and that's really what appeals to us. I mean, I think if you look at our statistics, and I should look at it before I mentioned, but last I had looked, we're anywhere between 5 to 10,000 daily active users, within our tool set. Um, so everything has to be, like I mentioned, butter smooth for what people are doing. and it just has to be like an overall great experience. And so um, that's really why we picked Solana. Just longer term bullish on the tech at its core. Compared to other L1s that exist, I think it's very much superior, and the community that's already here is amazing to boot. And then for future episodes to bring on, like, I guess it depends on the angle. I mean, going more on the builder's side, I'd recommend Alex from Blocksmith Labs. Have been a big fan of what they've created in general. So I think that they would be a pretty solid fit um, for your show. And, I'm sure he probably has some good recommendations as well. And then if you want to go ever on like the branding side, trying to get someone from the Klano team, I think would be awesome to have on as well, because definitely builders a little bit different.
Those were perfect answers. Could not agree more about Solana. We get asked all the time. We even still have people who are like, are you ever considering moving to Ethereum or a layer two? And the answer is like, no. Will we incorporate those because we're like a gaming company and we have this metaverse component? Yeah, 100%. Like, we'll make ways to bring those communities in and sort of be a Web3 hub. But as far as the actual tech behind the experience, it's all Solana, right? You said it scales like crazy with the increase of throughput that FireDancer is going to bring. The
Yeah.
network being able to do transactions at a higher capacity than like Visa and MasterCard. I mean, that's like legitimately insane. I'm still not sure that people understand the ramifications of that, but it's literally otherworldly. And the accessibility of it, man, the low fees, the good experience on some of the core pieces of infrastructure like Phantom. I mean, people for a while were talking about, oh, Phantom hasn't had any updates in a while. XNFT backpack is coming out. This is a really exciting new backpack or new wallet, and I love both. They're great, and it's just funny to me that we forget how much better even our supposed like least innovative quote unquote wallet is on the network just is far superior to the best wallet on any other network. It's just night and day, and it makes it so much easier for people that are spending time here.
Yeah, I completely agree with you 100%. And even with what you said too with Fire Dancer, I mean that will add um, so much more robustness to the network that I don't think a lot of people are really thinking about or probably exposed to. But I know it'll be a bigger thing. And I don't believe it's supposed to go potentially live until next year. So definitely still much in anticipation of that. And yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything else that you said
I
in
just
there.
imagine, man, like a future state where some of these larger Web2 businesses that have been working with Solana, which honestly, that's another great part about the chain, is you've really got like a core team that is working for you, right? I mean, Tolly and Raj are out there hustling, making those good connections, constantly trying to improve and find ways to grow the ecosystem, whether it's through working with Jump at Fire Dancer, whether it's through Saga, the mobile, creating partnerships with Google Cloud, right? I mean, there's just so many things that are happening. But I imagine a world where some of those companies see a network that empowers them to have transactions that are literally eclipsing their sort of traditional networks that they're relying on now, and potentially making some moves and implementations there that could really impact the volume taking place here.
Yeah, completely agree with you. And with that, I mean that they bring their brand and they bring the like confidence that's associated with it at the same time. So I think that's what's going to cause, you know, I'm not gonna use the meme term of mass adoption, but it's gonna cause a lot more people to take crypto more serious than it traditionally has been, even though like people are like, oh look, Bitcoin's down 60% from all-time highs, and it's just like, yeah man, but like if you zoom out, Bitcoin was like a penny or less than a penny back in 2009. So like compare that to like other financial instruments that have existed since 2009. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-blowing.
And when you do put that comparison, they say, oh, well, now I feel late. But as we all know, everyone here is very early. Plenty of time. We're just getting started. And we're just getting started with the Build Your Reality show. Episode 1 officially in the books. Drax, I want to thank you, my man, for jumping on here. For everyone tuned in, next week we will be having Ellie from Anybody's on to talk through their journey and what they have got going on. So, Drax, if you want to leave us with one final overview, quick little pitch on why the fuck everyone should join Foxes.
I mean, honestly, it is hands down like the best Solana NFT community that exists out there. On top of it, we have a lot of fun shit that you can do. It doesn't matter what is going on in the macro side. There's always something fun going on in Foxes. If that is of interest to you, come check us out and see what you think.
Love it. Thank you, man. Thank you, everyone here in the audience, for turning in. And I'm going to have fun finding a couple clips to post to get the old Spotify posting and YouTube posting, doing some numbers tracks.
That sounds good to me. I appreciate you for having us on too, by the way. So looking forward to, being back on probably episode like 69 or something like that in a little while. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with build your reality series.
69, episode 69 booked it. It's in the books. We're good to go.
Love
Awesome.
it.
Thanks,
Love it.
man. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we will catch you next week.
All right. Sounds good. See ya.